Hello there guys, welcome to my build of the Alfa Romeo 158/159 Alfetta in 1/24th scale from Mistercraft. Now according to the ScaleMates entry for this kit, it goes all the way back to 1950, with the kit first being released by Merit with some gorgeous box art, then by Smer, by Atlantis, and then finally by Mistercraft. This was intended to be one of those quick weekend style builds, which didn't really turn out like that. It ended up taking me a good few weeks. It isn't a super detailed kit, but it is one of the few affordable and available options for this car. Plus, Hobbycraft in the UK give you a £5 birthday voucher every year, and the other day I found a £5 down the back of the sofa, so I feel like I only really paid £1 for this kit. I was originally going to build it as a barn find, but then I thought I'd build it properly. Now the Alfa Romeo 158 was first built in 1937 and it entered what would be the equivalent of today's Formula 2 races. The car actually won first time out at Livorno in August 1938, and it won 5 more races in 1939 and 1940, including the Swiss Grand Prix and the Tripoli Grand Prix, both at the hands of Giuseppe Farina, who would later become the first ever Formula 1 world champion. After World War II, the car was pressed back into service, ultimately entering the first ever Formula 1 world championship season in 1950. In that year, the 158 won every round of the F1 World Championship at the hands of either Farina or Fangio, with the exception of the Indy 500, which was then part of the F1 World Championship, but which many teams didn't enter. Farina won the Drivers' Championship with the Alfa in 1950, while Fangio won the first of his 5 titles in 1951. The 158's last F1 start was in the 1951 season, while its final Grand Prix race was in 1953. By some measures, the Alfa 158 is one of the most successful Grand Prix cars of all time, winning 47 races from 54 starts, giving it an 87% success rate. So popping the box open, we notice some very old school style sprues with just the sort of central piece there, and quite a small number of parts as well. We've got here the upper chassis with the engine block, lower chassis, dashboard and seat, there's the nose, we have the tyres, and some simple decals. The instructions do erroneously say this is a 1/72nd scale kit, but it is definitely 1/24th scale. We've got some engine detail, and if the kit is as old as ScaleMates thinks, then it's quite impressive for the time, I would say. There are a few detail upsets available for this kit, but they often cost several times the price of the kit itself, so I wasn't going to bother with those. We simply build up the engine, the front and rear suspension, fit it all to the lower chassis, and then add the radiator, the exhaust and the upper chassis. Quite a simple build sequence. On the back of the instructions we have this nice full colour painting and marking guide. Being an Italian car, of course, it's going to be an Italian red. And a little bit of research will be needed here because back in these days the drivers had different numbers for every race. I also believe that Alfa Romeo use a different colour stripe around the grille to distinguish their drivers, and that's not actually shown or included in this kit. Initially I was going to just exclude the engine and glue the bonnet in place so that you couldn't see it, but then I thought actually quite a large percentage of the parts relate to the engine, so it's probably worth building it. As with all kits, I started with sub-assemblies, and the wheels seem to be the easiest ones to start with. 2 simple halves. The instructions are not very clear about the additions to the suspension and axles, but there are actually location grooves in those pieces. Equally, the parts are not numbered and the drawings are not clear necessarily in the instructions, but the way we notice is the front is it's got the steering mechanism on it, and thus the one without it doesn't. We also have a small rectangular plate on the bottom of that piece, and that will be too small for the corresponding rectangle on the chassis at the rear. You can see here this is the rear, and that's got that bigger rectangular base. So actually it is reasonably well engineered, I think, for the time. Equally, I think the fit of the upper and lower bodywork and the nose cone and the bonnet are all pretty decent. There's no major gaps or overlap or anything like that. Here you can see virtually all of the pieces of the kit ready, with the engine, the wheel and the suspension sub-assemblies already constructed. All we need to do now is get this painted and stick it together. I did give this kit a coat of primer because I wanted to make sure I had a nice smooth surface for a glossy paint finish, and because we want a red finish I went for a white primer so as not to dull that overlying red. White of course is quite a hard colour to get coverage with even with a primer, so you do really need to go carefully there, not put too much on and end up with runs or anything. Vallejo metal colour aluminium was used for the interior, and most of this does need painting because you can either see it from the cockpit through the driver's footwell, or you can see it when the bonnet is removed down behind the engine. It actually looks quite nice in white, I think. Originally I was going to airbrush the car red, but I found an old but unused can of Tamiya TS8 Italian red, which I bought a long time ago, and those spray cans are quite expensive, so I thought I should use it up. And they also do give a very nice high quality gloss finish. I was careful with this paint, however, to give it light coats. It's really easy to go over the top with the spray cans. And I also removed the masking because I find with a spray can the paint tends to build up against the masking and give you quite a big lip on the edge. So I took the masking away, I sprayed the red paint with a view to going back and touching up any of the interior aluminium later. And here I'm doing that with a brush. The Vallejo metal colour airbrushes and brush paints just as well. And you can see there a combination of a nice sanded primer coat, sandy with 2000 grit sandpaper, and that lovely Tamiya spray paint has given us a nice shiny finish. There are just a few details to pick out by hand now. So we've got the grille on the front. For the wheels we get some clear plastic discs which are supposed to go over the hubcaps, and we're supposed to paint the spokes on top of those. To be honest, I don't think they look very good, so I'm doing away with those and I'm going to have no spokes on them. I'm not going to make my own spokes, this is going to be a quick build and I'm just leaving those off. However, I did take some of my favourite Tamiya masking sheet and use my circle cutter to cut some masks for those tyres so I could paint the chrome on the wheels. A circle cutter is one of those tools that are fairly cheap and I don't use it very often, but when I do use it I really need to use it. And as you can see, once the Tamiya chrome is down, we pull that off. That's not a bad job. Just a little bit of touch-up needed down the side. It was then a case of putting these sub-assemblies together. We do have a small number of decals. On top here you can see the kit decal sheet. So we get a couple of gauges, 2 different numbers, and that sort of 4-leaf clover icon design for the side of the vehicle. I did buy the IndyCal decal sheet for this, which you can see on the lower half of the screen there. And I bought that for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I was already ordering something else from them, and I knew I was going to get this Alfa kit, but I didn't know whether it'd be an old boxing or new boxing, so I didn't know how the kit decals would be. And secondly, I wanted to have a different number. I wanted number 1 for Fangio in the 1950 British Grand Prix, and I wanted this coloured stripe here, which is the stripe that Fangio had in that Grand Prix. You can see the IndyCar decal sheet gives us those black vertical lines as well. They're to go on the engine grills on the sides, the vents, to try and make those stand out. To be honest, I probably won't use those, but it's nice that they're included. The dial decals were pushed into position. And then it was a bit of a difficult job to decide exactly how that instrument panel should go into the interior. There were sort of 2 rows of pegs, and it wasn't clear whether they want to go in between them or whether it wants to go in front of the first set. In the end, it seemed most likely to me that it would go in between them, and that lined up with that groove on the floor of the chassis as well. One thing you need to remember about the IndyCar decals is they're all one big sheet, so you do need to cut as close as possible to the decals to include the minimum amount of carrier film on each one. There are a number of images of Fangio's car at the 1950 British Grand Prix, but I can't show them here because they're copyrighted. But suffice to say, we have a number 1 on the rear here. We have the yellow band around the grille. And then, contrary to the instructions where we have this 4-leaf clover on the left hand side and this orange triangle on the right hand side, the images seem to show the clover design on both sides. Here's that extra engine detail. As I say, for a 1950s tooling, if that's the case, then that's quite a good amount of detail, I think, that will go under that nose cone. We do get a small windshield clear part, but I just didn't seem to get on with it. It didn't look quite right to me. The plastic looked a little bit too thick, a bit out of scale, and I just didn't like it. It seemed to break the lines of the vehicle, so I left it off. And with that done, my build of the Alfa Romeo 158 was complete. And I know this commentary is from 1949, but I couldn't find any from 1950.
De Graffenried is now taking Stowe Corner for the last time this afternoon. He bounces a bit as he goes round with his yellow wheels spinning, and he's motoring as he goes down to the chicane. He looks back to see if there's any opposition. He's going up to the hairpin bend, taking no chances this time, and is now heading up the straight to the Abbey curve, and I think in about 3 seconds max he'll be into your sight to take over the finishing line, because he's just crossing in front of the hangar now.
Can't see him. Is he going to come in a moment? He'll be here. Yes, he's here, flashing into sight. But is this the last lap? Yes, it is. I think it is the last lap. Up goes the checkered flag, and he's the winner. Well done to Graffenried. Listen to him go by.
Graffenried wins. That is the 100th.
So there we go, guys. That was my build of the Mistercraft 1/24 scale Alfa Romeo 158, as driven by Juan Manuel Fangio in the 1950 British Grand Prix. I hope you enjoyed the build. If you follow this channel, you'll know I like to build a variety of subjects. This build was a nice break for me from the more complicated builds I've got going on, including the 1/16 scale Andy's Hobby Headquarters Achilles, and a few others that you'll see in the coming weeks and months. I would like to thank my Patreon supporters and YouTube members for their support, and of course all of you for watching. It is massively appreciated, and every view, every like, every comment, every share really does make a difference, so thank you very much. I will have something military for you in the next video, so until then, thank you again for watching and have fun modelling.